Hey friends. I listened to a podcast yesterday. It's the Hidden Brain podcast with Shankar Vedanta as the host, and he interviewed a woman named Anna Lemke. The two episodes I heard were called The Paradox of Plenty and then The Path to Normal. And they were interviews. Anna Lemke is a researcher in psychology. I don't know how much of a neuroscientist she is, but she's certainly like doing research on how the brain processes pleasure, reward, dopamine, serotonin, all these elements that go into the chemical side of what's happening when we either have a desire or have a pattern of behavior, and or want to take corrective action, want to change something about our relationship to habitual behavior. And long story short, she basically corroborates everything everything I've heard other places over the last couple of years about how addiction is not something that we in our current circumstances, in our current technological and social circumstances, especially in rich countries, we can no longer treat addiction as though it's something that applies only to chemical substances or sort of highly potent, specific forms of indulgence that we would have classically thought of as addiction. We have to think about addiction as applying to almost everything in our lives, which is kind of a scary thought. But she talks about how various aspects of life, elements of life, like games, things seemingly completely innocent, like games, or reading, food, have become what she calls drugified, which basically means elements have been altered about how we either have. She gave 4 aspects of this. Let me see if I can remember them. It was accessibility, amount, so it's like the amount of something you can get, the ease of access, the potency, and there's one more element I can't remember. But these are the aspects of like a delivery of how we get what we get. So if we're getting games, for example, delivered to our phone, and any moment of the day I can pull that out and play this game, that's a new set of affairs. That didn't used to be the case before the smartphone, right? Food is one that I've talked about a lot. There are so many elements of the human body that are still sort of stuck 10, 15, 20, I don't know how many thousand years ago, as far as our biological response when we ingest certain foods, based on the level of availability of those foods and those nutrients when we were still roaming the planet, kind of finding our food as hunter-gatherers. Now we have supply chains and distribution systems, and access is ubiquitous and endless. But our biological system that filters for managing our desire of those things is completely overwhelmed. Nothing has changed there. We're still the same, Tandy computer trying to run this crazy new high-powered software. Also not a great image. I seem to be coming up with lots of metaphors in my video posts that I then subsequently go, that's not really a great image, but I guess it maybe kind of says what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, it's a brilliant interview, just set of interviews, 2 interviews, and it both, as I said, corroborated everything I've learned in other places about how we really need to take a look at virtually everything we do, from watching television to how we eat, to how we engage in exercise, to how we engage with our digital devices, obviously, what work, essentially everything, everything that we consume in some way, we need to think about it not as though everything is an addiction, but we need to understand that we are being offered a level of access and potency that pretty much creates a situation where we if we are not conscious of our consumption, then the danger exists to lapse into an addictive relationship to almost everything in our life. And that's kind of scary. That's kind of a scary thing to realize. It was funny because as I was listening to the interview, I was like, sounds so right. I mean, it makes so much sense. And funny enough, she prescribes what she calls, I forget if she calls it pain therapy, but she basically says we actually need to put ourselves into situations of scarcity, of deliberately seeking out experiences that are going to create a certain amount of pain, of discomfort, in order to be balanced, in order to have a healthy homeostasis in our system, because of the endless influx of pleasure-inducing and reinforcing substances, reinforcing behaviors. She calls it anything that triggers a response that makes us want more of it is called a reinforcing behavior. So anytime we consume something, do something, feel something, watch something that makes me want more of it, it's a reinforcing behavior, self-reinforcing behavior. So, I'm like, I've worked with this in my own awareness a fair amount, because, it's very evident if you're really paying attention to what your attention is doing as you engage in certain activities, it will become very clear very quickly that addiction is right around the corner. Everywhere we look, everywhere I look, I seem to see the potential for addiction just right there. It's just one click away, one step away. It's always kind of, I can set off an addictive pattern any time of day, anywhere, in a way that makes just a simple consciousness of our attention management. What I've heard called by psychologists the executive function, the ability of our mind to decide in the midst of potentially conflicting impulses or conflicting inputs, to decide what's most important, and do that not on the basis of fulfilling a short-term desire or a quick, addictive cycle, but on the basis of true, actual importance, actual integrity and importance to the integrity of the overall system. So that was cool. That was fun to hear, and it was really fun to hear somebody break it down in terms that just not only resonate, but also kind of elaborated my understanding of how this works. Another thing she said, which is kind of what prompted me to want to talk about this on the post, is she talked about how, she, as part of her her interview, and again, this is Anna Lemke on Hidden Brain. The episodes are called The Path to Normal, or The Path to Enough is the second one, and the first one is The Paradox of Plenty. And one of the things she said is, as she described her own addiction, which she goes into in some detail on the interviews and talks about, how her recovery from that was part of what prompted some of this research. But she talks about how part of the recovery process involves putting into language and saying out loud, ideally to another human being, what the issue is. Describing it with words seems to be a huge indicator of recovery. It seems to be a for whatever reason, a vital step. Not necessarily all important, but like one of the big ones. Up there with another one she mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, is honesty. People for whom it was important to always tell the truth seem to recover far better. They have far better metrics for recovery than people who were willing to lie. And it's not just honesty about the addictive behavior or the addiction itself. It was honesty overall. People who just have a commitment to being honest overall recover from addiction much, much more consistently than people who just don't have that, who are willing to fudge. And some of them even, I think some of her patients even described it as lying or being dishonest is like the first, it's like the gateway into the addictive behavior, which makes total sense. If you think about sobriety in the kind of larger sense, not in the sense of like drugs or alcohol, but just sobriety in the sense of the overall integrity of our system, lying, being dishonest, where that we internally, cognitively know I'm not telling the truth here. I'm saying something, I'm communicating something that I know is untrue. Well, your system is out of integrity immediately. It might be subtle, right? It might truly just be in the mind that integrity breaks. But once that has happened, what's to stop other aspects of integrity from kind of also being disposable? I thought that was really interesting. That I kind of, because this is something that comes back to like, I mean, you can get kind of woo-woo about it, but it comes back to the idea of virtue and, or as the Buddhists would say, right action, right thought, right action, all of which is ultimately, the way that I would say it is integrity. Having physiological integrity, having emotional integrity, having psychological integrity. Those are all domains of, there's a structure there. There's a naturally occurring structure in our bodies and our minds and our emotions. They're all composed of parts that are working in harmony. Integrity is what health is in those systems. So taking one of them out of integrity in whatever way just means you've compromised it, you've weakened it, you've taken it out of the structural alignment that allows it to function properly. And that's, the reason I like to describe it that way is because it makes things like lying or cheating or stealing or whatever the action might be, it makes it very evident where how much under our control that is, and how much it's not about some moral pronouncement. It's not about some deity that's going to punish us, or even some disembodied system of justice punishing us for doing something wrong. It's that our own system goes out of integrity and can no longer function properly. There's no need for moralizing or judgment. It's almost just kind of like understanding the laws of physics of human life, human existence. So I realize I'm now a couple steps down the road in my thinking from where I started, which is about this, the kind of the paradox of plenty, as Anna Lemke calls it, this idea that we're constantly now living in a world that's offering us so much stimulation, so much of whatever we want to consume in whatever way, that we almost have to we almost have to understand everything we do as being a kind of she calls it like a modern day asceticism, where renouncing the ubiquity of the things that cause addiction has to be voluntary, and it has to be sort of firm. We have to do it with intention. We can't it's not just going to happen. And in fact, the various systems that give us all these things, all this plenty, all this abundance, are in fact designed to snag our attention. The whole point is to grab our attention, to grab our addiction, because that's what makes us consumers. That's what's going to make us consume the product. So there's a good bet that's not going to be where the change happens. Everybody's not just going to decide to only offer the right amount of sugary food on their supermarket shelves, or to start putting up, quotas for how much sugary food you can buy, because many more than that would not be healthy. That's not likely to happen. That's not coming soon to any supermarket near you. It's got to come from the individual understanding and the individual consciousness. So, anyway, I'm seeing how long this post is getting, and I want to wrap it up, but it's something that really speaks to my interest and my kind of fascination with how the human system works, and what we can be doing by way of building consciousness, expanding consciousness, evolving our consciousness in order to be more healthy. So, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. I will see you on the next one, which will be tomorrow.